the Italians did something very clever back in the 50s and 60s, and maybe it wasn't intentional, but their language of what they did was quite global. Mm-hmm. So they did things that were very accepted by the world, in a way. You know? And that I learned that a little bit, that when you do industrial design, I think even if you do a space, but more industrial products inevitably need to be global. Mm-hmm. So if you design a mobile phone and you're going to have 1 million people holding it and interfacing it, you got to think about all the users, but the language of it also has to be collectively accepted. It can't be too colloquial or too culture specific. So that's one thing I kind of learned. There was a certain sense about their language in general, and there was a certain, I guess, minimalism in a way. I don't like that word very much, but a more reductive, nice things, beautiful things, but more reductive, that I appreciated from Italian design. The other part I learned was that they all were a lot of them and a lot of the companies were determined to do something original. Mm-hmm. And I always believed in that sense of originality, and it was opposite of the way I was even educated. I remember being in Carleton in a drawing class, and our professor, this very famous automotive designer, and he worked in Detroit. His name was Jacques Ostagui. Mm-hmm. And he was teaching us to draw, right? And I wouldn't draw the way he was teaching us to draw, but the other 15 students all did the same. And I couldn't, and I think I couldn't because starting at the age of 3 or 4 with my dad, I learned to draw in a very more artistic or more painterly way or something, and I couldn't do this stiff kind of thing that he was pushing, and he was very critical of me and gave me a hard time. He called me Chagall, I guess because I was too painterly or something. So through that education and then leaving Canada and then being in Italy, I realized something is that the appreciation there was for the creator. And creators inevitably mean to create means to do something original. We a lot of times misuse that word. We just, we call everything being creative. But to put something into the world that no one's ever done, to do something unique, inevitably that should be the case since we are all unique, right? So why are we collectively trying to make all the industrial designers think the same, work the same, etc.? Likewise, architecture, if you look at Bauhaus, it produced tens of thousands of architects who are all doing the same buildings. So there's nothing creative there, right? So I think that was the real eye-opening for me at this age of 22, 23, 24 when I was there, was seeing the passion that everybody, the model maker who would come into the office, he would come in and carve perfectly beautiful solid wood models of a television that I was working on. Imagine seeing a solid wood television, it was really beautiful. He was so passionate about the model, but he also even said, I think you should make it a little narrower, like his eye and his sensibility. And then, who I worked for, my boss, and everybody seemed to have a real desirous want to make something beautiful and original, And that was very hard because when I went back to Canada after, I go to this design office, and they were the most respected design office in Canada, and they'd been around for 30 years. Kuipers, Adamson, Norton, 3 partners. At this point, when I got there, only Kuipers and Norton was there. Adamson went on his own. And Norton is originally from St. Martin's in England, and Jan Kuipers studied in The Hague under Piet Mondrian and Theo van Doesburg, which is kind of amazing. So I really respected their backgrounds and their history. And I loved working with them. The problem was just the clients, the kind of projects, everything was the opposite of Italy, And the expectations from the clients and the lack of respect from the clients was disturbing, shocking actually, A lot of times after a meeting, I would get in a car with Ian or Jan, and I would practically be in tears, and I would say to them, this is ridiculous. I said, why did they even hire us? And these guys already were so entrenched in this kind of way that they didn't even really understand why I'm upset or what's bothering me or why, because they started to accept all this, They accepted that they were kind of providing a service rather than a creative act. let's say. Right? They saw it as a service act. Industrial. Now, industrial design can be all those things. I mean, it can be social act, it can be political, it's obviously economic, but the creative part is the part that I need, you know? And I think most people who are creative, I mean, we say, oh, look, my son's really creative, my daughter, they should go into design school. Well, there you go. If they're creative or architecture, they go study architecture. Hopefully they have an opportunity in their lives to create something, right? And not just have a job, you know?